Okay, class, lecture number 25. We're almost through. Just one more lecture, and it will be a short lecture. I think it will be a short lecture anyway. But anyway, probably we won't have a great deal of notes to take during our last lecture. Last time we were together, we talked about the Eastern Bloc countries. That's the satellite countries. Some people call it the Iron Curtain countries. Those are all communist countries. All right, we also mentioned about the Truman Doctrine. The United States will come to the assistance of any free world nation resisting communist subjugation. We mentioned the Marshall Plan, European Recovery Plan. Under that plan, the United States will pay pony up $13 billion to rebuild 17 destroyed nations. Huge, huge success, by the way. And we mentioned that about Berlin airlift. When you know the reasons for that, 277,000 flights and 2.5 million tons of goods were flown into Berlin to sustain that city. This led to the creation of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. That is known as NATO. All right, and we also had the counterpart to that, which was the communist side, which is Warsaw Pact. Warsaw Pact is not in existence today. We saw the emergence. Nikita Khrushchev, with his policy of peaceful coexistence, he'll be replaced by Leonid Brezhnev, a much more orthodox Soviet leader. All right, with the Brezhnev doctrine, no communist nation could defy socialism, could defy and pull away from the Soviet Union. The most powerful person to bridge the gap between the East and the West was the Chancellor of West Germany, Willy Brandt. Willy Brandt, I like that guy too. And we also talked about solidarity with Lech Walesa. Lech Walesa, you need to recognize his name. And towards the end of the class period, we mentioned that of the common market. All right, today it is referred to as the European Union. I strongly in support of that. I wish it success, and I surely wish that Great Britain would not exit out of the common market or the European Union. Okay, so let's go into today's lecture here, and I hope it'll be kind of exciting for you. We're wrapping the semester up here, folks, so we're going to be talking about some of the events from the Cold War here. So anyway, let's go back to our camera. And let's see, some of the things that are going to take place here. Europe's population is going to increase. In 1940, this was during World War II, Europe's population was 264 million. And by 1982, Europe's population, 320 million individuals. 40% of the workers at that time were employed in government services of some type. All right, now let's take a look at West Germany, take a look at France, because they will make use of a number of foreign workers. In Great Britain, I beg your pardon, in West Germany, we had 1.3 million foreign workers. Most of those were Turks. Most of them were Turks, and the remainder of them were pretty much that of Italians. France had 1.8 foreign workers. 1.8 foreign workers. All right, in Germany, we refer to them as Gastarbeiters. You could just see them on the street. They were easy to identify. They were, like I said, about the Gastarbeiters, it was about 90% were Turks. All right, on we go here. Let's see what else happens. Trade unions will proliferate at this time, and we'll have 8 million union members in Great Britain, 6.5 union members in West Germany, 3.5 million labor workers in Italy. Secondary schools. The number of high school enrollments will double in Great Britain and in West Germany, and we'll find in the university enrollments will triple. Often we'll find this associated with protests and riots taking place at these major universities. Most of us are familiar with all of the riots took place in colleges, universities, and in America anyway, back in the 1960s, the early parts of the 1970s. But we failed to recognize that you had the same thing taking place in Europe, particularly at the University of Paris. And a lot of student protests would take place. Many women began to demand equal rights. They wanted the same pay, the same jobs, the same job opportunities as that of men. So Great Britain established the Equal Pay Act. This meant that women got the same pay as a man. We would say have the same thing in the United States with the Equal Rights Amendment there, which will deny discrimination to females in the workplace. Often we'll see this established, associated with affirmative action. And affirmative action with minorities, also with women, where often the person that has the best qualifications for a job will not get that job. It will go to somebody that is female or a minority with that. Causes a lot of dissension too with the males. I'm a firm believer in that. I believe believe that we need to have the Equal Rights Amendment, the Equal Pay Act, and in fact, I'm convinced in our country that we have that in place. It becomes a political issue where many politicians will argue that women do not get the same pay as men. Not in my world. Not in my world. In my world, in college teaching, we're on a salary schedule here, my friends. And if you have men that have worked 20 years and women that have worked 20 years, we're all paid the same. There's no discrimination there. Not in my world. All right, so I want to share a couple of photographs here. And I'll give you the names of these two ladies. They were very prominent during this period of time. The lady that's holding the two buttons, which is right over here on this side. This lady is Betty Friedan. Betty Friedan, the National Organization of Women. And a one on the other side there wearing the boots, that's Germaine Greer. She wrote The Female Eunuch in the 1970s. Betty Friedan was 1960s. All right, let's see if I have these ladies here. And before I get to them, I wanted to mention to you about abortion was legalized in most of West Germany and also in most of Western Europe and also in the United States. We won't go into that delicate subject. Here are some of the ladies I was addressing a little bit earlier. I did not talk to you about Simone de Beauvoir with the second sex. I did talk to you about Germaine Greer, the female eunuch. Betty Friedan, I showed you the likeness of her holding the now button. The feminine mystique came out in the 1960s. Gloria Steinem, Adrienne Rich happened to be some of the other ladies of that period. All right, now another organization is going to emerge, and this is going to be largely after the Yom Kippur War. I just happened to think about that. Yom Kippur War took place in October of 1973, and for the United States, we supported Israel in that war against Syria and against Egypt, and as a result of that, those nations that supported Israel were punished. An organization was created called the Petroleum Exporting Countries, and the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, sometimes referred to as OPEC. In fact, that's what it's always referred to as OPEC, rather than giving out the long name of the organization. And it placed an oil embargo on those nations that had supported Israel, 1973. And this will cause gas prices, gasoline, oil and gasoline prices, in those free world Western countries, to include the United States, to literally skyrocket. Honest to goodness here. When I left the United States in 1972 to go to Germany, I lived in Germany for 2 years. I've told you probably repeatedly anyway. I can remember in Tuscaloosa pulling up to a gas pump, and I drove off. The reason for that is that gas was 25 cents a gallon. And I said, that's outrageous. I'm not going to pay that amount, when I knew that my favorite gas station had that same gas, a gallon of gas, which was 23 cents a gallon. Well, I went to Europe, and I came back in 1974, and gas prices were 67 cents a gallon. And I thought, there is no way that I'm going to pay 67 cents a gallon for gasoline. It had tripled. It had tripled here. So all of this was due to OPEC, and it's going to lead to a slowing of the economy. And I want to share with you some gasoline prices. Did I write these down for you? And it was a slowing of the economy here. It was referred to as stagnation, by the way. But in 1971, I want you to just think about this. In 1971, gasoline was $1.73 a gallon. 40 years later, in year 2021, or actually it's 2020, it was just last week, gas was $1.73 a gallon. So that is 40 years, and our gasoline prices have remained the same here from 40 years ago. But hang on now, it wasn't always that way here, my friends. We're going to see, I wrote it here, in 2012, gasoline prices were $3.74 a gallon. In 2014, gasoline prices $3.54 a gallon. That was in 2014. 2016, gasoline prices had halved, and gasoline prices were $1.72 a gallon. The lowest that I saw it in 2016, in February 2016, $1.36 a gallon. I wonder what's going to happen to gas prices in the next couple of years, my friend. I'll let you figure that one out. All right, some of the leaders in 1960s, 70s, 1980s, one of the best known is this lady, Margaret Thatcher. And I love her. She was Prime Minister of Great Britain, and I wrote that PM, meaning Prime Minister of Great Britain. A wonderful, wonderful lady. I think she's Great Britain's greatest leader, next to that of Queen Elizabeth I here. All right, and she died in recent years, by the way, and it was a kind of a sad situation. And when she died in 2013, some of her opponents in Great Britain were chanting the song "Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead." I think you know where that came from. All right, let's move on. Some of the other leaders of this period of time. In West Germany, we had Willy Brandt. I told you earlier, he's the one that's going to bridge the gap so effectively between the East and the West. And following him, Helmut Schmidt, Helmut Kohl, popular name. We don't see people in our country with this name. And France, Charles de Gaulle resigned his position as president of France in 1969. He'll be followed by some of these individuals I'm sure you have not heard of before: Georges Pompidou, Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, Francois Mitterrand, and Jacques Chirac. All right, as France moved kind of away from the United States in a close relationship. All right, so let's spend a few minutes here with this. The USSR. So what's going to happen to the Soviet Union? Well, the Soviet Union, this powerful empire, has been around ever since 1924, after the death of Lenin, a new constitution, Joseph Stalin. But anyway, a new leader, a president of the Communist Party, the Soviet Communist Party, whose name was Mikhail Gorbachev. Mikhail Gorbachev. If you're following in your textbook, I am on page 994, and here is a likeness of Mikhail Gorbachev. There he is right there. And I'll go back to myself here for a second to show you another likeness of Mikhail Gorbachev, just for a second though. And there he is with his hands up. In just a few minutes I'm going to be talking about the man to his right, wherever my fingers are, right there. And that individual is known as Boris Yeltsin. Boris Yeltsin. All right, so kind of hold that in the back of your mind here about Gorbachev. I like him. I like him very, very much. I have a book at home that's just dedicated strictly to Mikhail Gorbachev. All right, but Mikhail Gorbachev moved away from these oppressive communist policies that they had. I want you to know this now. And he established a new program which was called Glasnost. Glasnost means to eliminate oppression, to eliminate this strong thumb, this iron fist of the Soviet Union. All right, that is known as Glasnost. And he also introduced a new program which was called Perestroika. Perestroika. And this would allow for private ownership. It's like capitalism. It allowed for private ownership. So recognize the difference between those two, Glasnost and Perestroika. And with that in mind, this means that we're not going to have as much oppression that we had earlier, and now we're going to see strikes to take place. Strikes to take place in Poland. And our old friend that we talked about the last time here that we were together, Lech Walesa, he won the Nobel Peace Prize. And Lech Walesa had this organization, leader of this organization called Solidarity. And strikes would take place. This would be followed by more strikes. These strikes would take place in Hungary. They would take place in Czechoslovakia. In other words, we get a softening of this iron fist here. And new elections will be held in those countries. And when new elections are held, the communists were voted out of office. And they were replaced by moderate leaders. And with the Czechoslovakia now becoming shall we say, less oppressive, now we see that there's an entranceway from Czechoslovakia into West Germany. So we have a path here, and more and more and more of these countries will adopt a pro-democracy way. And lo and behold, on the 9th of November in 1989, the Berlin Wall was demolished. That was unbelievable that that could actually happen. The Berlin Wall comes down. And I want to share some photographs with you. And this is what the Berlin Wall looked like. Now this is, you have to dissect this for a second. You can see one wall, which is here. One wall, which is here. Okay? Now look back here. This is a minefield. Then we go back further. Here's another wall that's present there. I don't know if I see any machine gun towers there, but they are present there. And in fact, that's a little chunk of the wall as the wall came down. And let's see here. here's a photograph here showing you the wall. You can't see that very well. That's at the Brandenburg Gate. Today that wall is not there. It is there, and I can't find my photograph of it, so maybe I'll show that to you tomorrow if I run across a photograph of the remains of the wall today. And then here's a chunk of the wall right here. You can buy these with your hard-earned money. This has a certificate of authenticity showing you a chunk of the wall. You can't see it for the lighting here very much. Let's see how much I paid for that. I believe I paid about €7 for that. €6.50 for that chunk of concrete. I guess probably had some guy behind with cinder block, busting up cinder blocks with a hammer, and some spray paint, and was spray painting that. That's probably the way it was. But it doesn't really matter as long as I believe that. That's fine. All right, now you can see what the Brandenburg Gate looks like. There it is today, minus the wall. See if I can find it once again, showing you the Brandenburg Gate with the wall in place there. There you go. And then here without. One of your videos that I have out for you to watch is that of Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan is talking to Mikhail Gorbachev and talking at Mikhail Gorbachev, and he's telling him, Mr. Gorbachev, take down that wall. Now today when you go to the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin, this separated East Berlin from West Berlin, and it was closed during the Cold War, but in 1989 it did come down. During the old days, the center entrance right here was reserved for the emperor, for the Kaiser, and people could only walk through those areas which are on the left and the right of that. Today, feel honored if you're in Berlin, you can actually walk through the center if you wish to do so there. Berlin's a wonderful, wonderful town. Wish I was back there right now, I honestly do. All right, let's see what else we have here. All right, let's get things repositioned here. In October of 1990, crazy, East Germany and West Germany united. And we now have a unified Germany again. So if you're present in Germany today, you can drive from the eastern sections, western sections, eastern Berlin, western Berlin, with no problem whatsoever. When I lived there in 1972, 1973, we were not permitted to go into the eastern parts of Germany. We could only stay in the western parts. Okay, so communist governments will disappear in Albania, Bulgaria, Romania, Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia will divide. It will become the Czech Republic and Slovakia. And we have Yugoslavia, which is now subdivided also too into Croatia, Slovenia, and Serbia. Hungary, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, all of those countries are wonderful to visit. Boris Yeltsin will become the president of the Russian Federation. I showed you a likeness of him just a few minutes ago. And I want you to recognize Boris Yeltsin. And I like that guy, as a matter of fact. There's more to this story than I'm revealing to you folks. But anyway, by December 1941, the USSR was gone. It was gone, and it will be replaced by the Commonwealth it will be replaced by the Russian Federation, and the Russian Federation will control a number of other countries here, which are all a part of the Commonwealth of Independent States. Now, what I'm going to show you is not the flag of Russia. The flag of Russia is red and blue. But this is a flag of the CIS, the Commonwealth of Independent States. This includes today Azerbaijan, Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Moldova, Russia, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and the Ukraine. And I think Ukraine would love to get out of the Commonwealth of Independent States. All right, moving right along here. So warfare is going to break out in the Balkans. Breaks out in the area which Yugoslavia would like to control. Now, Yugoslavia is Serbia today, or largely Serbia today, but this was brutal warfare that's going to take place between Serbia and Serbia trying to overtake these countries here, Croatia, a wonderful country, Slovenia, a wonderful country here, and also Bosnia-Herzegovina, with its capital city of Sarajevo that we've talked about at earlier time. Brutal war. If you're present in Bosnia and Herzegovina today, it's like you go through some of the war-torn areas there from the 1990s, and honest to goodness here, my friend, it's just every house, every farmhouse, every barn, everything destroyed from that carnage that took place there. It's a sad affair. particularly around Sarajevo. An international peacekeeping force was placed there then to stop that carnage, and it is still present there today. Not as many as they once had. War broke out in Kosovo. Once again, it's Serbia. Serbia trying to do a little ethnic cleansing down in Kosovo, which was largely Muslim, by the way. International peacekeeping force present there to this day. Not as many as there was at one time. Okay, new countries will emerge. And these countries will emerge from Africa and Asia, and they will often attempt these industrialization and modernization at a very rapid rate. And so these were third world countries, or even further down the line than that, and now they're going to rapidly industrialize and modernize. And sometimes this is done with such great haste that we run into some real disasters with this. Case in point was one, I think it was 1984, with Union Carbide in Bhopal, India. It was a toxic gas leak at Union Carbide, and lo and behold, we had 8,000 people killed, and there was another 150,000 individuals that were injured in that carnage. At Chernobyl. Now, Chernobyl is present in former USSR, and I think it was 1986, we had a nuclear plant, a nuclear reactor to explode. All right, and of course they're still having problems with that to this very day, by the way, and that was in 1986. Drug trafficking. Drug trafficking will emerge in Colombia, in Mexico, in Myanmar, that's former Burma, Afghanistan, Malaysia, and of course some of that trickles here to the United States, particularly from the drugs that are coming in illegally from Colombia and Mexico. All right, and in Iran, the Shah of Iran was deposed in 1979, and he was replaced by a fundamentalist Iranian despot, if you will, by the name of the Ayatollah Khomeini. Here's what he looks like, the Ayatollah Khomeini here, and deposed the Shah. Now, the Shah had been placed in his position by the CIA in 1953. He was friendly to the United States. Can you imagine that? He was honestly friendly to the United States. Not this guy. This is the Ayatollah here. But was friendly to the United States. We had a good relationship with them. And when I first started teaching college here at Walker College in 1976, some of my students, can you believe this? Some of my students were Iranian students. By golly, they were good students, too. They were all A students. But when the Ayatollah gained control in 1979, our Iranian students disappeared here at Walker College. And I don't remember ever going to school with an Iranian student, when I went back to graduate school and so forth with that. All right, so anyway, I don't want to make this a long story. I've been telling my U.S. history students about this. But in 1979, in October 1979, angry Iranians stormed the United States Embassy in Tehran. They took 66 Americans as hostages at that point. President of the United States at that time was Jimmy Carter. We placed economic sanctions, froze Iranian bank accounts, and just gave them a little tap on the wrist. And they held those 66 hostages, the Iranians did, for 444 days. We in America, to show support for the hostages, we tied yellow ribbons around trees in our yards. I flew an American flag like all other Americans. We flew American flags in our yard for the entirety of that 444 days. I still have that flag today. It's all faded, all in tatters, But I should have brought it in for you, but I did not. I forgot that today. Okay, so that was a bad situation there with the Ayatollah. And Iran still has some serious problems with Islamic fundamentalists in their country. Okay, some of the other things that are going to take place. In 1949, China had experienced a civil war. The civil war had been taking place since the 1920s. But in 1949, the communists, under Mao Tse-tung, gained control. And they deposed the I guess you would call it, free world side. It was full of corruption here. And Chiang Kai-shek. And for Chiang Kai-shek and his followers, they were banished off to the island of Taiwan, Formosa. And that's where they are today. Of course, the leader, Chiang Kai-shek, he's no longer living, nor is Mao Tse-tung. If you go today to the People's Republic of China, Beijing, and elsewhere in China, you will see every step that you take, you will see a photograph or a likeness or a portrait of Chairman Mao Tse-tung. All right, a very popular person, whether you want him to be popular or not. All right, and let's see what else is going to take place. In India, was controlled by Great Britain. But there's going to be a quest to try to attain independence for India. We had such individuals as Mahatma Gandhi, also known as Mohandas Gandhi, great soul. Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru, and they would push for independence from Great Britain, and they would get that independence in 1947. Problems still existed between certain sections in India and other sections in India, and finally Pakistan separated from India and was created a separate nation in 1950. Here's a likeness here of Gandhi. I think he looks like that Gollum guy, Lord of the Rings. That's probably an ugly thing to say. But anyway, okay. So, South Africa. After 27 years of imprisonment, a black African by the name of Nelson Mandela. And I've explained this to you before. In South Africa, we have whites that are present there, you have blacks that are present there, so you have black Africans, you have white Africans, and Nelson Mandela was a black African. He had been in prison for 27 years. 27 years. I didn't write the date down, but he was released in 1990, and he later became the president of South Africa. He worked to relax the policy of apartheid. That's discrimination, Jim Crow laws, if you will. All right, so and his funeral was just a few years ago. You probably watched that. And all right, let's move on. Let's see what else is going to take place. Some of the world events that will occur during this period of the Cold War. The Korean War will take place 1950, 1953. If you want to learn more about that, you take my U.S. History 2 course. I'll bring you up to speed with the Korean War, often referred to as the Forgotten War. We also had the war in Vietnam. Vietnam will take place in our involvement in Vietnam, the United States. 1950, 1975, indirectly, we were engaged militarily from 1964 to 1972, one of the worst nightmares our country has ever experienced. In 1959, Cuba was led by a dictator by the name of Fulgencio Batista, and mixed-race individuals, most people in Cuba are, and he was a corrupt dictator. And in 1959, a group, and it was, no kidding, I'm not making this up, it was actually a baseball team. Fidel Castro was a pitcher for the team. Los Barbudas is what they referred to him as, the bearded one. And over in the eastern parts of Cuba, they began to stage a rebellion and actually defeated Batista's army, put Batista into flight, and Fidel Castro took over as the leader of Cuba. The United States broke off diplomatic relationships with Cuba, and they formed a strong relationship with the Soviet Union at that time. Take my U.S. history course, you'll learn all about this, all about the Bay of Pigs fiasco, the Cuban Missile Crisis, fun stuff. Cuba's a fun place to visit, by the way. I don't know if you folks will be able to visit there or not. All right, let's move on. Israel gained its independence in 1948 from Great Britain, and we'll see that the Palestinians will turn upon Israel. There'll be several wars to take place. The Six-Day War of 1967, the Yom Kippur War I told you about a little bit earlier, that is 1973, whether you read my writing or not. Amazing war in which Israel fought on one direction, fought Syria, and in the other direction fought Egypt, and they came out victorious with both. A war that most people are not familiar with is the Iran-Iraq War that took place from 1980 to 1988. Iraq won that war. They were under Saddam Hussein, by the way, and it's estimated that 800,000 people were killed in that war. Most people have not even heard about that war. In 1990, on the 2nd of August, Iraq invaded tiny Kuwait. Take my U.S. history course. I'll give you all the details about this. This was under Saddam Hussein, by the way. And let's see what I wrote for you folks here. And there's Saddam Hussein. He is not with us now. And for the President of the United States, George Herbert Walker Bush, and that's George Herbert Walker Bush, he was able to assemble a 29 coalition nation army to defeat Saddam Hussein and Iraq. And we had such things as Desert Storm, Desert Shield, Desert Storm, led by Norman Schwarzkopf, by the way. He was a coalition commander. And we'll eliminate that problem in 100 hours once we start the ground operation. Ireland and Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland will continue to experience problems here with the extremists from the pro-Catholic side to pro-Protestant side here. And thankfully, in these times of troubles, we've got things settled down a little bit. Wonderful place to visit, both the northern part and also the Republic here. But hopefully they can maintain that peace. All right, some other incidents that we're going to have during this period of time. And I don't want to use up all my information today because we're going to talk about a lot of events next time we get together. But we had some threats of terrorism. I'll go into some more of that at a later time. 1972 in West Germany, I can remember this so very well. We had the Red Army faction. This was under the Bader Meinhof gang that were just terrorists, and these were German terrorists, by the way. When I flew into Germany, and I flew into Frankfurt to Rhein-Main Air Base, and I spent the night there. And it was a long flight, thirsty flight, and I went to the Officers Club after I arrived in Germany, in Frankfurt, and I woke up the next morning and found out that the Officers Club had been bombed, by this Red Army faction here. It was not the Officers Club I went to. There were two Officers Club, at the air base there, and they bombed the one that I was not in. So I was very fortunate with that. I could tell you a long story about that, but I will not do so. 1972, the Olympics took place in Munich, Germany. Palestinian Liberation Organization, commonly referred to as the PLO, attacked and kidnapped the Israeli Olympic team. I was in Munich at that time at the Olympics. Can you believe that? I really was there. And for some of these terrorists, it was a mess. And they ended up, police, commandos stormed the area there, had Israeli team. They were on a helicopter, and a hand grenade was thrown in the helicopter, and it blew up the helicopter, killed a bunch of people. And it was thought that some of the PLO members were on the loose. They had escaped. And I can remember I was in Munich at that time, and everybody was just terrified. They were afraid these terrorists, were going to cause further damage with that. We had in 1988 the bombing of the Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland. In 1993, the bombing of the basement of the World Trade Center. You probably are not even familiar with that, by Islamic terrorists. And September the 11th, 2001, we all know what happened at the World Trade Center. Once again, Islamic terrorists. 1995, the bombing of the Murrah Building in Oklahoma City. And this was done by Timothy McVeigh. And he was a serviceman. He was just a regular American guy. I don't know really what stirred in the mind of this individual, but this was the largest terrorist attack in this country up until the time of 9/11. All right, so anyway, that's a pretty good start towards closing out the course here, and I've been at it here for about 33 minutes, so I promise you we'd have a little bit of a shorter lecture today. Oh, I want to show you one more thing here before we leave, because I want to take this home with me. I don't keep this sort of thing down here, and I meant to show this to you the last time we were together. And of course we had the dismantling of the Soviet Union. You saw that I had a number of Russian Soviet helmets on or hats on during the previous lecture, making myself look kind of ridiculous. But these are all medals that were Soviet medals, and I was able to purchase these, through the years. And I used to be able to identify all of these, and I don't remember what they are today. But this medal right here, it's about faded out, but it has the likeness there of Mikhail Gorbachev that is present on it there. So I'd like to collect this sort of thing. Okay, enough of that, and I'll go ahead and call it quits for today here, folks. All right, stay up with your material. You have your third examination coming up and final examination coming up very, very quickly here. Okay, thank you.